West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Well, the Trump president campaign has a very bad day coming. The worst day any presidential campaign has ever had. And that day is scheduled for September 26th. The Harris for President campaign is now 46 days old, and every one of those days has been a bad day for Donald Trump. But the worst campaign day for Donald Trump is coming. On Thursday, September 26th. Donald Trump is now formally scheduled, to have the worst day in the history of presidential campaigning as we know it. He will be the first presidential candidate in history to have a federal prosecutor outline in detail, in writing, including possibly secret material from a grand jury describing Donald Trump's federal crimes that the prosecutor says Donald Trump committed to overthrow the will of the American people in the last presidential election. Federal Judge Tanya Chutkan ruled late today that on September 26th, Special Prosecutor Jack Smith must file his full evidentiary argument in writing about why Donald Trump can be charged with federal crimes, even though the Supreme Court created a new presidential immunity from criminal charges for some of what Donald Trump did to overthrow the election results. In a 1-hour, 14-minute hearing today in her Washington, D.C. courtroom, Federal Judge Tanya Chutkan dealt with a flurry of attempts by Trump criminal defense lawyers to delay any consideration of evidence in the case of United States of America versus Donald J. Trump until next year, no doubt in the hope that Donald Trump will then be in a position to order a new attorney general to drop the case. An appeal of the case to the United States Supreme Court earlier this year allowed Trump-appointed Supreme Court justices to create a brand new law of the land based on nothing in the Constitution, granting criminal immunity to Donald Trump for some of what he did leading up to and on January 6th. Special Prosecutor Jack Smith and his team, having now read the Supreme Court opinion, limiting what evidence they can present about crimes committed while Donald Trump was president, impaneled a new grand jury in Washington, D.C., which issued a new superseding indictment of Donald Trump, which preserved all 4 criminal charges against Donald Trump in the original indictment, including conspiracy against the United States of America, but eliminated some of the underlying evidence that supported those charges. Special Prosecutor Jack Smith obviously believes there is enough evidence in the superseding indictment, which is 9 pages shorter than the original indictment, to convict Donald Trump of the alleged crimes. In court today, Jack Smith's team, led by Thomas Windham, urged Judge Chutkan to first do what the Supreme Court has ordered her to do and evaluate the new indictment to see if it conforms to the limits imposed by the Supreme Court's immunity decision. Trump lawyers opposed that approach because that would force possibly public consideration of the evidence against Donald Trump before the election. Trump criminal defense lawyer John Lauro argued instead that Judge Chutkan should first rule on the defense's motion to completely dismiss the case based on the Supreme Court immunity decision. If Judge Chutkan ruled on that dismissal motion first, no matter how she ruled, that ruling could and would be appealed by the losing side, and it could be appealed all the way to the United States Supreme Court, adding possibly another year of delay to the case. That delay is not going to happen. Adam Klasfeld, who will join us in a moment, was in the courtroom today, and it showed us once again that a court transcript can never quite capture the full drama of what happens in the room. When Trump's criminal defense lawyer began his complaint about allowing any evidence in the case to possibly be revealed before the election, Adam Klasfeld, live tweeting the proceedings, reported this. Lauro warns about prosecutors being able to put into the public record at a very sensitive time in our nation's history, which we can't ignore. Chutkan let out a sigh and leaned back in her seat at that remark. Adam will describe that moment more fully for us, but here is how it appears in the transcript. Mr. Lauro, well, it's incredibly unfair in the sense that they're able to put in the public record at this time, very sensitive time in our nation's history, the judge, Mr. Lauro, which we can't ignore, that they're able to, basically load up on what they think this case is about without our ability to meet those factual assertions with the right to cross-examine. John Lauro will have the right to submit a written reply to the prosecutor's written description of the evidence against Donald Trump. That written reply is due October 17th. A minute later, when John Lauro once again referred to, quote, this sensitive time, Judge Chutkan had enough. Judge, wait, Mr. Lauro, yes, the judge, let's just discuss what the sensitive time is. I understand there is an election pending, and I've said before, and I say again, that the electoral process and the timing of the election and what needs to happen before or shouldn't happen before the election is not relevant here. This court is not concerned with the electoral schedule. Yes, there's an election coming, but the sensitive time that you're talking about, if you're talking about the timing of legal issues and the timing of evidentiary issues in relation to when the election is, that's nothing I'm going to consider. The Trump team tried to throw another distraction at the judge that did not work. John Lauro told the judge he wants to file a motion to dismiss the case on the basis that Jack Smith's appointment as special prosecutor is unconstitutional. Justice Clarence Thomas was the only Supreme Court justice, that's 1 out of 9, who noted in his written opinion on the immunity decision that he also believed Jack Smith's appointment is unconstitutional. The opinion of one Supreme Court justice that is not part of the ruling in the case is, of course, immaterial, but it was enough for Donald Trump's favorite federal judge, Aileen Mercedes Cannon, who Donald Trump appointed, to reach the decision that Jack Smith's appointment was unconstitutional and thereby dismiss the criminal case Jack Smith brought against Donald Trump in Florida for illegal possession of classified documents and violations of the Espionage Act. Jack Smith is appealing that decision to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. The Circuit Court of Appeals for Washington, D.C. has ruled repeatedly over the years that the appointment of special counsels is constitutional. That means that Judge Chutkan is bound by the rulings of the appeals court in her jurisdiction. But she has, in effect, no choice but to rule that Jack Smith's appointment is constitutional. And nothing that Clarence Thomas or Aileen Mercedes Cannon has written seems to impress her. Trump's criminal defense lawyer told the judge, Justice Thomas wrote a very persuasive concurrence that suggested that the special counsel does not have authority. And in addition, another judge, a very respected judge in the Southern District of Florida, wrote a decision dismissing the special counsel's case on appointments clause basis and also on appropriations. And it is a critical issue that now has to be decided by the court in light of Justice Thomas's interest in this issue and also in light of what the judge decided in the Southern District of Florida. It seemed Judge Chutkan could not quite believe what she was hearing. She repeated to Trump's lawyer what he was asking for, which made it sound all the more preposterous. The judge: you want to file this because there's dicta in a concurrence, there's binding D.C. Circuit precedent on this issue, you have dicta in a concurrence written by Justice Thomas, and you have an opinion filed by another district judge in another circuit, which frankly this court doesn't find particularly persuasive. So that's your basis for seeking to file that motion? Mr. Luro, Your Honor, we couldn't file the motion because of the circuit court decision. The judge: so is your argument that another district judge in Florida, that opinion plus dicta in a concurrence in the Supreme Court, those two things combined to warrant me going against binding D.C. Circuit precedent? Mr. Luro, what I'm saying is that the court should consider this issue, and Justice Thomas, in effect, directed us to raise this issue and suggested that we do it immediately in light of his view in that concurrence. The judge: he directed you to do that? Mr. Luro: well, I shouldn't say he absolutely said, do it. But when you read that opinion, it's absolutely clear that that's something that we have to do now to preserve this issue. The judge: well, I certainly don't read the opinion that way. There is no suspense on how Judge Tanya Chutkan is going to rule on that motion, arguing that Jack Smith's appointment is unconstitutional when it does finally reach her consideration.
It is Friday, the 6th of September of 2024, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. And we will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life, indeed. Yes, it's so hard after, so many years of mentioning that our little Yorkie Precious would be, as our door girl and would be seating you. But we no longer have her anymore. As you know, she's crossed that rainbow bridge. That's what they call it. And, we had her while we had her. And it's still, there's this muscle memory. I still, even with my mom, and she passed in April, I still start to do things at a particular time because that's when I would do it for mom. So, wow. I don't know. Maybe I hold on to it because it's sort of, a memento. Maybe. How are you doing today on this Friday? I don't want to bring us down with all this grief because it is indeed a joyful period in our political history, I would say. And I think that things are being exposed that we all knew about. I mean, come on. The Russians were behind the 2016 election like that's news. We all knew it. And we had to put up with the other side calling it hoax. We all also made mention at the same time that we don't think you protested too much. Hoax. It's all a hoax. Yeah, well, every accusation is a confession. And we started that off as sort of like a joke, and it's really a truism. They don't like it. Oh, no. So, it's, I'm kind of holding off on rubbing people's faces in it on the local level. Because, I gotta say, I went back through the timeline on some of these, quote, debates we've had about vaccines, about fluoride, guns, and, of course, public education, government in general, and especially liberal Democrat communists. And yeah, the usual suspects who I always suspect have been funded by the Heritage Foundation, Federalist Society, Koch brothers et al. certainly cited Tenet Media a lot. And of course, any type of citation that you may have, like, I don't know, the Brookings Institute. Oh no, that's a communist organization. You can't trust them. Well, you keep putting up the Hoover Foundation at Stanford as if they're supposed to be some sort of credible source. Well, they're at Stanford. Well, so what? Brookings has actually a lot more credibility than Hoover anyway, so... Or is the Hoover Institute. That's what it is at Stanford. Anyway, you cite, well, the New York Times, anything, the Washington Post, credible news sources. Nature magazine, peer-reviewed studies. Oh, commie, it's fake. You're trying to groom our kids with fake. Oh, really? Nah, that was woke. Oh, woke. And all along, we might make a little mention of like, hey, you know, that sounds really, or that reads a lot better in the original Cyrillic, because Cyrillic is not an oral language, it's a written language. So, and they would just like, the responses always belied their, well, the fact that they're at least dupes, if not useful idiots, or useful idiots, if not dupes. Which one is it? Which one is inferior to the other? Because I got to tell you, the way you become an asset is taking money. And no one's going to convince me that taking $100,000 a podcast, I could be making $500,000 a week. Well, apparently I can't be duped. Apparently. And I will not be anyone's useful idiot. No. If I took $100K for every episode offered to me or paid to me by a Russian cutout, that would not make me a victim to a crime. That would make me an accomplice, therefore an asset. You don't have to get bags of money at a designated spot in the park at a designated time. Go there with an umbrella, open it twice, and then let your dog run across the green. And then grab the bag, call your dog back, walk on. No, you don't have to do that. It doesn't have to be so clandestine. Or is it clandestine? Anyway, you can have it just like put into your crypto account. And then, I bet you $10 to donuts that if they put it in crypto, Vlad has a way of, well, getting it before they do. I bet you. He's a mobster. He knows what he's doing. Also KGB, which makes it worse. Okay? That's the way I look at it. You don't want your intel people with, I don't know, ulterior motives running a mob organization, because it could get pretty bad. So we would always argue the fact that, you know, it's not just the United States that's being attacked by these fools. It's going on around the world, and here's evidence here of a court case that is being adjudicated as we speak, over and over and over. Look at what they did in Ukraine. Look at what they did in Donbass. Of course, in this area, there's a lot of, pro-Russian types. They don't call it the Russian River for nothing. Well, that's pretty far from us. But, there was a big Russian influence from the trapper industry that, in the greater scheme of things, wasn't that long ago. We have a Russian Orthodox church right out just on the other side of the mill. Pretty elaborate. Has the Greek colors, though. What's up with that? Anyway, you might get some pushback of like people who actually like Vlad. And I, tend to steer clear of those types because you never know. Deifying a mobster might be, a clue that maybe you want to give those types a wide berth. I do. So I'm holding off on rubbing their faces in it at this point. But it was curious because when I would see these citations, and I'd remind myself, tenants sounded really familiar. And indeed, it's because it had been cited. It had been part of some of the videos that were pushed upon us, which I also got to say I don't really look at. I try not to really look at the videos too much. I'll read, some work that somebody's written, in a magazine or something that's posted, that's linked. Got to be careful there too, but regardless, I try to stay away from the moving images because I don't trust the KGB and what their capabilities are of convincing people that Donald Trump is a masculine guy with that poofy bouffant hair and orange pancake makeup. What is it in the electronic communications of the visual image that cause people who watch The Apprentice to think that this guy is a good businessman? My God. On the other hand, there are people who don't find the Family Guy funny because it reminds them of their family, and they don't think their family's that funny. I guess we do. Weird. Okay. We always thought weird was funny, but it can be dangerous as well. Not one or the other, but both. So let that be a lesson to us. And let's choose joy. I'm tired of this damn droll darkness being pushed upon us constantly. Hell in a handbasket. Get out of here, mofo. The only reason you think it's hell in a handbasket is that, you have to share a peach. I want all the peaches. We'll share one. No, we're all mine. Yeah, well, for want to eat a peach and hoard it all, you want to destroy the world around us just to prove your point about peaches. Jesus. It's not even about peaches. It's about the weakness of the human character to be able to determine what is anti-American bullshit. What is more anti-American than denigrating the public school into non-existence? Come on. You're going to get rid of the prom? Maybe it's because all of these useful idiots and dupes had bad high school experiences and they just didn't know how to figure it out. So they were more susceptible to being duped. I don't know. It's got to be something else. That's why I think it's the moving images that are somehow programming people into believing that this guy is some masculine demigod. And I don't mean Gog. I mean he's a god to them. Oh my God, indeed. One thing about the Catholic Church, at least the kind that I went to that taught critical thinking skills, is that you turn those critical thinking skills upon the Catholic Church's own scholarship. Because you want to find out if it has any credibility. So when you go out in the world, you don't just blindly argue about the goodness of the Catholic Church when you find out, they've been pretty murderous in their past. Do I forget that? Oh, well, of course, we're all sinners, and since we're all sinners, we'll just have to forgive ourselves. Here, you're forgiven. Go with God. Oh, but before you go, tithe and say 3 Hail Marys and an act of contrition, and you're good to go until next week, and we'll do it all over again. So if you're going to go out in the world and argue that construct, you kind of like to make sure that you don't get blindsided by some fact that you've either ignored, glossed over, or don't know about. Apparently, over there, they just make up bullshit right and left, whatever they're told, whatever the little electronic televised communication technique is being used, because they all do it at the same time. We made jokes about it. Well, it looks like Tim Pool and Benji over there are getting the same marching orders from Vlad because they're only seconds from posting the same bullshit in the same grammatical, syntactical style. Yeah, well, and then we would make the joke, well, it reads better in the original Cyrillic. For 10 years or more, we've been doing this. Well, it's finally. It was one thing to sanction some people over in Russia, but it was another to start busting people who are in the United States doing this bullshit. We already busted a spy and they laughed in our faces about it. Maria Butina. Or is it Butina? All right, what do we have in store for you? How'd you like that build-up? What do we have in store for you here in the rest of this salon that we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy on this fine Blue Moon Spirits Fridays? Rest assured, it is not an entirely liquid diet today. Though, we do feature the liquid diet, and that's what we do. And that liquid diet is the French 77. Some like the 75, but I go with the 77. Look it up. Anyway, yes. The Trump for President campaign has a very bad day coming on September 26th. Yes, he does. Okay. We may not get any type of ruling, but I would like to see some evidence. You know, we got a lot of stuff in the last minute about, but her emails. Okay. So maybe a little tit for tat. You Ruskies want to try to have an influence campaign? Well, bring it on. On the rest of the menu, a Missouri judge ruled that anti-abortion Republican Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft, yes, the son of that Ashcroft, used misleading language to summarize a ballot question designed to restore abortion rights in the state. The people, they know that laws are for little people. Of course they are. He just doesn't like it when the little people want to pass an initiative, and he got caught. Federal investigators seized phones from New York City's police commissioner and at least 3 top deputies to New York Mayor Eric Adams. Yeah, that guy gets in trouble a lot. I wonder why. I joke. And a Massachusetts physician was sentenced to 9 months in prison for punching police during the January 6th insurrection. Well, and then she has some home confinement for a few months. I guess that makes it a stiff sentence. I don't know. After the break, we move to the chef's table where police in Munich exchanged gunfire and killed an assailant who planned an attack on the Israeli consulate. And the U.S. Justice Department has widened its indictment of Russians in the Whispergate malware attacks aimed at destroying computer systems in Ukraine and 26 NATO allies, including the United States. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. I apologize for the weird audio we've had this week. I've got to figure out, maybe it'll just be something that will be as simple as a reboot, which I'll have to do when there's not much happening on the radio, which there's always something happening on the radio. You know that. So I apologize. We're trying to figure it out, and hopefully next week it won't sound like we're in a big echoey hallway. Okay. I'm in a booth, but I've always been in a little booth. Who knew? Hey, if you follow me at Justice Putnam in most cases on social media, you'll be able to have quick access to the show notes and links diaries that I post on Daily Co's 10 minutes before showtime, so that you have, well, access to the actual reportage in its entirety by the actual reporters who have penned the piece, even though they were at a keyboard. I like using penned the piece. Don't you? Anyway, do follow me at Justice Putnam, and you'll be able to do everything I just said. You can. All right, since we're always burning up time at the top, why don't we go ahead and tuck into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy on this fine, not so liquid diet, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. We have some actual starchy substance that you can chew on. Okay. The metaphors never stop, do they? No, they don't. This first offering is by Summer Ballantine, or is it Ballantine? From the Associated Press. A Missouri judge ruled yesterday, Thursday, that an anti-abortion GOP official, that sounds innocuous, used misleading language to summarize a ballot question designed to restore abortion rights in the state. Well, the first rule of journalism is that you build your case. Keep adding on the information. Don't give them everything at once. Okay. Cole County Circuit Judge Cotton Walker threw out a description of the amendment as written by the office of Republican Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft, an abortion opponent, son of John. In his ruling, Walker said Ashcroft's language was unfair, insufficient, inaccurate, and misleading. Wow, he was taught by the Ruskies. See, we can do that to every one of them now. And they're so weird, they're going to fight and deny it. And every time they do, they just keep admitting that they are. Walker wrote a new summary explaining to voters that the measure would remove Missouri's abortion ban and allow abortion to be restricted or banned after fetal viability with exceptions. Now, Missouri banned almost all abortions after the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in 2022. Walker's language also notes that the amendment would create a constitutional right to make decisions about reproductive health care, including abortion and contraceptives. At least 9 other states will consider constitutional amendments enshrining abortions this fall. Or abortion rights this fall. Arizona, Colorado, Florida, Maryland, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, and South Dakota. And in all those cases, they are public initiatives. And the one thing that they really hate is when Americans vote. Open Hearts at the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Federal investigators over this past week seized phones from New York City's police commissioner and at least 4 top deputies to New York Mayor Eric Adams according to people familiar with the matter. FBI agents seized the devices on Wednesday from the homes of several high-ranking city officials, said two people who spoke on condition that they not be named because they were not authorized to discuss the ongoing investigation. The officials include First Deputy Mayor Sheena Wright, Philip Banks, the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety, his brother David Banks, the city school's chancellor, and Timothy Pearson, a mayoral advisor and former high-ranking New York Police Department official. Federal investigators also seized devices from the home of Police Commissioner Edward Caban, one of the people said. The searches add to a flurry of investigative activity around Adams' administration, his campaign, and the first-term Democrat himself. Democrat. He previously received subpoenas and had his electronics seized in federal inquiries. Federal authorities have not accused him or any of his officials of any crimes, and Adams, a retired police captain, has denied any wrongdoing. The searches represent the latest sign that federal authorities are scrutinizing members of Adams' inner circle. He took office as mayor in 2022 after serving as Brooklyn's borough president and as a state senator. Last fall and winter, the FBI raided the home of a top Adams campaign fundraiser, the residence of an official in the mayor's administration's international affairs office, and properties belonging to Adams' Director of Asian Affairs. Federal agents seized the mayor's phones and iPads as he was leaving a November event in Manhattan. Then he, his campaign arm, and City Hall received subpoenas from federal prosecutors earlier this summer. One of the people who, with knowledge of the matter, has said that the recent subpoenas that have been requested are for information about the mayor's schedule, his overseas travel, and potential connections to the Turkish government. The Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A Massachusetts medical doctor who punched a police officer during the mob attack on the U.S. Capitol, I think that was an insurrection, was sentenced yesterday, Thursday, to 9 months of imprisonment, followed by 9 months of home confinement. Jacqueline Sterer was in a crowd of rioters, insurgents, inside the Capitol on January 6th of 2021 when she struck an officer with a closed fist and shouted a profane insult. Sterer told U.S. District Judge Timothy Kelly that she is not proud of her actions that day, including her regrettable encounter with the police officer. I accept full responsibility for my actions that day, and I truly wish reason had prevailed over my emotions. Sterer also turned to apologize to the officer whom she assaulted. The officer, only identified only by her initials in court filings, told the judge she feared for her life as she and other officers fought for hours to defend the Capitol from the mob of Donald Trump supporters. Donald Trump's insurgents. Do you take any responsibility for your actions, or are you just going to say, "It wasn't my fault, fight or flight"? The officer asked Starer before she addressed the court. Starer, age 70, of Ashland, Massachusetts, pleaded guilty in April to 8 counts, including a felony assault charge, without reaching a plea agreement with prosecutors. Prosecutors recommended a prison sentence of 2 years and 3 months for Starer, a physician who primarily practiced addiction medicine before her arrest. Starer's attorneys asked the judge to sentence her to home confinement instead of incarceration. Online licensing records indicate that Starer agreed in 2023 not to practice medicine in Massachusetts. The state issued her a medical license in 1983. She attended Trump's Stop the Steal rally near the White House on January 6 before joining the mob outside the Capitol. She entered the building through the rotunda doors roughly 15 minutes after they were breached. Well, that brings us to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, Dr. Moreau Meets Me Too. Blink Twice is at its heart a dark satire about power, privilege, and rich men behaving badly. The rich man in this case is tech entrepreneur Slater King, Channing Tatum, who meets a young waitress Frida, Naomi Ackie, at a gala he's hosting, and within hours whisks her, all starry-eyed, and her friend Jess off to his private island for a luxury vacation. We know from real life that rich men and private islands are a bad combo. However, in this case, we are also told that Slater has stepped down from his own company for some past bad behavior, about which we never get full details, but can guess as things proceed that it probably involves his treatment of women. Frida and Jess aren't alone on the island. They're joined by other women, none of whom have known Slater for very long either before they were invited to his little paradise. Even before Jess shares with Frida her feelings that things aren't right on the island, we already know something's up. Frida wakes up with unexplained dirt under her nails, then Slater's assistant / buddy Vic, played by Christian Slater, really seems to dislike her despite her belief they've never met. First-time director and co-writer Zoe Kravitz does a good job at pacing throughout the film. That, along with the vivid color palette used in the set design and the use of unusual close-up angles, help build a beautiful, albeit otherworldly vibe that suggests, just like the colors of a venomous snake we see, the island may be a place of sinister goings-on. While venturing close to heavy-handedness at times, Blink Twice, not unlike 2022's Island Set the Menu, does a wonderful job ever so slowly building to its absolute perfect ending. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
This is the story of a small-town newspaper and the attempt to assassinate former President Donald Trump. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. The small town of Butler, Pennsylvania, where Donald Trump's July rally was held, has its own newspaper, the Butler Eagle, which assigned 2 reporters and a photographer to cover the event. A big story there, of course. Sadly, the Butler Eagle is a dying breed. The U.S. has lost 1/3 of its newspapers since 2005, thanks generally to advertising migrating to the internet. But the Eagle has refused to die, refused to sell out to a large chain, which generally is the death knell for local news. The paper still publishes 6 days a week. At the rally, after the assassination attempt, its reporters and a photographer were working hard, documenting history. One reporter, as the AP put it, was slightly dazed and forgot where her car was, so she kept on interviewing, documenting, reporting. After the Secret Service hustled Mr. Trump into the nearby car, people around the photographer Morgan Phillips, who's 25, began shouting vitriol at her. "I just felt really hated," she said. "I never expected that." From our point of view, thanks to the staff of the Butler Eagle for doing more than their part to keep the First Amendment alive and functioning as it should. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government by and for the people. The U.S. Justice Department announced actions against a sophisticated Russian propaganda campaign designed to influence voting of specific demographic groups in the 2024 election and shape attitudes toward the war in Ukraine. September 4th, U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland accused groups linked to the Russian government of paying U.S.-based conservative podcasters to push inflammatory and false news stories. According to a Department of Justice statement, 3 organizations under the direction of a first deputy chief of staff in Vladimir Putin's inner circle also created websites and social media sites intended to trick Americans into thinking they were reading legitimate news sources. The organizations created dozens of look-alike websites with Russian-produced propaganda, including the Washington Post, CNN, Fox News, and others. Other efforts use fake social media sites to target voters in swing states and conservative states, and specific demographic groups such as gamers, Hispanics, American Jews, and others. DOJ says 32 of those site domains were seized. 10 Russians, most of whom are connected to RT, a state-sponsored television network, have been sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury Department. DOJ cites an unidentified Tennessee-based company as being paid to produce videos used in the effort. We've linked the DOJ statement and documents outlining the Russian plans at AmericanDemocracyMinute.org. I'm Brian Beal.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1941. The Packing House Workers Organizing Committee, part of the CIO, and Armour & Company signed a master contract. This was the first such contract in the meatpacking industry. Within 2 years, 3 other major meatpackers also signed agreements with the union. By 1943, the United Packing House Workers of America represented over 60% of the country's packing house workers. 2 earlier efforts to unionize meatpackers had not been successful. The Amalgamated Meat Cutters and Butcher Workmen of North America was the first national organization dedicated to the unionization of the meat industry. Between 1900 and 1904, this union focused primarily on organizing skilled butchers. A 1904 strike proved disastrous. The meatpacking companies used African Americans and immigrant workers as strike breakers. Black workers had been barred from participation and leadership in the union. The second wave of unionization occurred when the U.S. entered World War I, and Southern African Americans began to migrate to Chicago. The Chicago Federation of Labor began another organizing campaign in the stockyards. Many black workers were hesitant to support what they saw as the white man's union. During the 1921 strike, management again tried to thwart workers' solidarity along the lines of race. The strike failed. Many strike leaders were blacklisted for life from working in the industry. The Packing House Workers Organizing Committee recognized that they must be more inclusive in order to unite workers. The union organized both skilled and unskilled workers, and across racial and ethnic lines. When this union rebranded itself as the United Packing House Workers of America, its headquarters were in Chicago. The union's new approach to organizing resulted in the first master contract for the industry. It stands as a reminder of what true solidarity can accomplish.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 63 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting to be cooler today, only 102. Okay, well, that's cooler. And it looks like we'll have a mix of clouds and sun. Well, maybe it will be cooler than it was yesterday, but we will still have near record high temperatures. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Then partly cloudy skies tonight will give way to cloudy skies late overnight with lows in the mid-60s, and that is not nearly cool enough, darn it. Winds will be out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Then partly cloudy skies tomorrow and only just merely hot at 97 degrees Fahrenheit. Winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Similar temperatures expected on Sunday. Looks like ragweed pollen is now the dominant pollen, overtaking the previous grass pollen, and it is in the moderate range. Also, the air quality index for the region is in the moderate range at 71 parts per million. So if you have breathing issues, you better take care. And that daytime UV index is high at level 6. Also take care. You can still do plenty of damage at level 6. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.01 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles. And relative humidity, yes, relative humidity is at 71%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. And that is a lot of engine noise back out there. But it also is, in terms of what we're speaking about, the weather underground, indeed. Let's see, the weather station just outside the city center in London is registering 64 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 75 degrees and sunny. Rome is 87 and partly cloudy. Kabul is 72 and clear. Hong Kong is 86 degrees and fair. Tokyo is 81 and clear. Auckland, New Zealand is 58 and cloudy. San Francisco, California is 58 and partly cloudy. Chicago, Illinois is 66 and cloudy and continuing with their beach hazard warning. And New York, New York is 71 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Matthias Schrader and Guillaume Olsen of the Associated Press World Desk brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Police in Munich exchanged fire with a gunman near the Israeli consulate in Munich yesterday, Thursday, fatally wounding him. Authorities said they believe he was planning to attack the consulate on the anniversary of the attack on the 1972 Munich Olympics. No one else was hurt in the shootout that happened shortly after 9 a.m. in the area near the consulate at a museum on the city's Nazi-era history. Officers had been alerted to a person carrying a gun in the area near downtown Munich and returned fire when he shot at them. The suspect, who was carrying an old long gun with a bayonet attached to it, died at the scene. 5 officers were at the scene at the time the gunfire erupted. Police quickly deployed about 500 officers to the area. Police said the gunman was an 18-year-old from Austria, but investigators were still looking into his motive. They didn't give further details on the suspect who left a car near the scene, except to say that he lived near Austria. We have to assume that an attack on the Israeli consulate possibly was planned early today, Bavaria's top security official, State Interior Minister Hermann, told reporters at the scene. It is obvious that if someone parks here within sight of the Israeli consulate, then starts shooting, it most probably is not a coincidence. Prosecutors and police said in a statement later Thursday that currently believe the plan was for a terrorist attack, also with respect to the consulate of the State of Israel, and they are still investigating the man's motive. Thursday was the 52nd anniversary of the attack by Palestinian militants on the Israeli delegation at the 1972 Munich Olympics, which ended with the death of 11 Israeli team members, a West German police officer, and 5 of the assailants. There may be a connection, Bavarian Governor Markus Schroeder said. That must be cleared up. Matthias Schrader and Guillaume Olsen of the Associated Press World Desk brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Police in Munich exchanged fire with a gunman near the Israeli consulate in Munich yesterday, Thursday, fatally wounding him. Authorities said they believe he was planning to attack the consulate on the anniversary of the attack on the 1972 Munich Olympics. No one else was hurt in the shootout that happened shortly after 9 a.m. in the area near the consulate at a museum on the city's Nazi-era history. Officers had been alerted to a person carrying a gun in the area near downtown Munich and returned fire when he shot at them. The suspect, who was carrying an old long gun with a bayonet attached to it, died at the scene. 5 officers were at the scene at the time the gunfire erupted. Police quickly deployed about 500 officers to the area. Police said the gunman was an 18-year-old from Austria, but investigators were still looking into his motive. They didn't give further details on the suspect who left a car near the scene, except to say that he lived near Austria. We have to assume that an attack on the Israeli consulate possibly was planned early today, Bavaria's top security official, State Interior Minister Herman told reporters at the scene. It is obvious that if someone parks here within sight of the Israeli consulate, then starts shooting, it most probably is not a coincidence. Prosecutors and police said in a statement later Thursday that currently believe the plan was for a terrorist attack, also with respect to the consulate of the State of Israel, and they are still investigating the man's motive. Thursday was the 52nd anniversary of the attack by Palestinian militants on the Israeli delegation at the 1972 Munich Olympics, which ended with the death of 11 Israeli team members, a West German police officer, and 5 of the assailants. There may be a connection, Bavarian Governor Markus Söder said. That must be cleared up.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.